and welcome back for episode number 129 of the weekly playback. I am doing things a little bit differently today. Usually I record earlier in the day and then I try to leave in time to go take care of the stray cat colonies while it's still daylight outside, which is why I always end up feeling rushed. Today I decided to go a little bit earlier to the cat colonies and start recording after that. However, what that means is though I won't be rushed, the daylight will end probably as I'm shooting this video, and it might get a bit darker as I'm shooting this video. So hopefully that won't happen while I'm discussing the games and holding up components, but it'll probably happen towards the latter part of this video. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll be better, maybe not. So, you know, maybe I just need to manage my time better and start shooting much earlier on Sundays. But I usually fall behind on my reading and I end up catching up on my reading just before shooting the video. So that's one of my problems. So yeah, I just need to get better with time management overall. Anyway, that is my babbling, so let's just get started. Oh no, before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to some of my gaming friends. I want to give a shout out to, I don't know if he actually watches the intro to my videos or not, but I want to give a shout out to Bruce, Jeff, and Andrea, who are three people who always are willing to play prototypes with me. And I just really appreciate that, because before I made these gaming friends, it was like really hard to convince people, my gaming friends, to play like Kickstarter preview games with me, because they would just want to play games that they have played over and over again and are comfortable with. But you know, this group of friends who I've now, you know, been playing games with for like a year and a half or something, they are just really, you know, great about playing games that have not yet been published and very patient and everything. So, you know, a huge shout out to them, because without them, you know, it would not be possible to preview games. So thank you to them for being really awesome gaming buddies. Okay, now we can begin. Let's talk about Baghdad, the City of Peace. This game is for 1 to 4 players. It is hitting Kickstarter in January 2025. It's designed by Fabio Lopiano and Nestor Mangione, and the art is done by Roland McDonald, and it's published by Alley Cat Games. And I played a 4-player game of this. Now, the board for this is like made up of several different pieces, so I cannot like really hold up the entire board for you to show you the board, since it is comprised of many different pieces, but it is a round board and I'm going to post pictures of it, but I will show you the central part of the board, which is connected. So this is the central part of the board, which is going to have a bunch of city tiles placed on it over here, and I'll show you some examples of city tiles. So here are some examples of what city tiles are. You start the game with a bunch of starting city tiles placed onto the board. So here is like a special like luxury good with like an artifact on it. Here you have a patient, and patients do offer different types of icons on them, and I'll explain why that's helpful and needed. And then the green ones are simply just books. And then finally you have the gray ones, which are students, which also offer a special kind of icon on it. So those are the various types of city tiles that you will find on the city part of the board. On this main city part of the board, you're also going to find here in like the central area, the place where you are going to be building your mosque, or maybe it's a palace actually, you're building your palace. So you're going to have 4 pillars that will be built, 4 foundation blocks, 4 walls, and then after the 4 foundation blocks are built, you can then place on the dome, and then on top of the dome cap, which I have had a lot of issues with the wordings, calling the base the dome and then the top part the cap, because to me the dome should be the round part and the bottom should be like the base of the dome. So calling the actual dome part the cap just really kind of irritated me, but maybe I'm wrong because I'm not an architect, so maybe that is the way it's supposed to be. Oh, and before I get further into this, this is a pre-production copy, so things are of course subject to change, and I am sponsored to do a 1-minute overview video of this game, of course, which will likely end up being 3 minutes long because there's a lot to talk about in this game. And but this part, this weekly playback, is not sponsored, of course, and my thoughts are my own. But that being said, I've always loved Fabio Lopiano's games and Nestor Mangione's games. Like, I'm a huge fan of their games, and this is no exception. And quite frankly, this is probably one of my favorite game of theirs after having played it, even though I came in last place, but I'll get into all of that at the end. So outside of the central board, you're going to have some different areas. This is the area that's going to have a market of building tiles that you can build out, and I'll show you an example of those when we get to that part of the game. Here is the river, and on the river you will have one boat to start out with, and you can place out new boats, and you'll be advancing along the river and collecting various goods. And then at the end, once you dock at the port, there will be scoring tiles here, and you will be able to score for the scoring tile if you manage to dock your boat at a port. Here we have, so if you build out your no, this is not the library one. This is the palace. So if you decide to contribute to building to the palace, you are going to place some architects onto this board, and I'll explain how all of that works in a minute. And again, at the bottom, you're going to have scoring tiles over here. And by placing your architects, you will then get a multiplier for the specific scoring tile for which you will be able to score for. So there's always going to be variability in this game by where different things are placed as well. Here you have the library. If you have collected books in your own player board, you will be able to collect various other benefits throughout the game. And on the top, you're going to have some visitor cards. So you have 3 daytime ones and 3 nighttime ones. Nighttime ones will always offer some kind of scoring ability, like some kind of points that you can gain at the end of the game if you have managed to meet the requirements of that card by the time it gets pushed off of your player board. And I'll explain how all of that works as we start talking about the game. And this is what an individual player board looks like. However, all the player boards are a little bit different based on where the rows are placed. And once you start placing city tiles, you will unlock the benefits between 2 connecting tiles once you've placed 2 tiles. However, you do need certain icons in order to place city tiles. And again, I'll talk about all of that in a minute. Over here, you're going to have buildings and architects, which you'll need to place out. And I'll discuss how that works with these icons over here. You have extra boats here, which you can place out by paying for them, and I'll talk about that. And here is where you're going to be placing the cards that you play. And there will always be 3 cards showing, and 1 will come off at the start of your turn. Let me just show you one individual player's components so that you can see what some of those look like. So these are screen printed on both sides. Very nice. So here is a boat, for example. And again, each person has 5 boats. They start with 1 in the river, and the other ones you can place out if you pay for them. Here is an architect, and all architects, I call them architects, they might actually be called something else. They all look the same. However, your vizier, who is the person that's going to be moving around on the main board, looks a little bit different. I cannot find my vizier, and all the viziers from player to player look different, which is nice. So I can't find my vizier at the moment, but if I find him, then I'll show him to you. Here is a building, which you'll be placing out when you build out building tiles. And let's see, what else haven't I shown you yet? Yeah, and each person is going to have some of these, and I'll explain how those work. Again, that's associated with the library. You have a tracker to keep track of your favor. So there's a favor track on the board, which you will have, so that keeps track of your favor. And yeah, I think those are most of the components. Oh, here's my vizier. I finally found him. So here is my vizier, and again, all the viziers from player to player look a little bit different. So that is very cool. Okay, so how does this game play? So I don't have a printed rule book for this, so I will be referring a little bit to the rules on my iPad just to remember how things go. But each person is also going to start the game with 3 cards in hand, and everyone's cards, from what I could tell, are the same. So for example, and you're going to take the cards that match your player board's letter. So for example, if you have this player board, you're going to take the cards that are for letter D. However, I had letter A, so I'm just going to find the board for letter A. Not that it makes a huge difference, I guess, and just use that. So here are the cards that I had. So I played with this person. She was my character. And as you can see, each card will have some icons at the top and something that you will gain once this card is removed from the bottom section of your board when it slides off, essentially. Here is a boat icon. So when you play a card in your first turn, you're simply going to place 1 card down, and then you will be able to take some kind of an action. So what do you do for an action? So when you place a character card, then the first thing you get to do is move a boat if the card you just played has a boat icon icon on it. So if the card in the first slot has a boat icon on it, then you can move your boat in the river by the number of total icons you have in your player area. So let's suppose you had previously played a card that had a boat icon on it, and which slid over, and now you've played this card. Now you have 2 boat icons, so you can move one boat either 2 spaces, or you can move 2 different boats 1 space each. So that's when you might want to pay coins in order to get more boats out. However, coins, money in this game are really hard to come by. So I've been told. For me, it was a little bit easier in the beginning, but again, I came in very last place and I did very, very badly in this game. So maybe, you know, maybe you do want to be low on money throughout the game. And not do what I did. But yeah, so if you want to, you can at any time during your turn put out a new boat, and then if you have a boat action on your turn, you will do the boat action first. If you do not have a boat icon on the card you just played, then you ignore the boat icons that are existing in your player board, underneath your player board, and then you move on to doing your main action. So what is the main action? You're going to move your vizier. So everyone starts the game with the vizier placed somewhere in the main city board. So now your vizier is going to move into the next quadrant. So you're always going to move into the next quadrant unless you had earned a special token that allows you to move an additional quadrant. So there are these special tokens that you can spend, and you can earn them in a variety of ways, which will allow you to move from one quadrant to another, but skip that quadrant and move into the other quadrant. And there's definitely going to be times when you want to do that. So once you move onto a new space, you can either move into a building space, which means you can build a building. So you're going to look at the main building board here and select a building. So there's different level buildings and they cost a different amount. So a level 1 building costs 1 coin, then 2 coins, and so on. You must build a level 1 building before you can build a level 2 building, and so on. You cannot go out of order. So you will select one of the 2 face-up buildings. There will always be 2 face-up ones, unless of course they run out, then you will move on, and so on. So you'll select one of the face-up ones. If you take the one from the bottom, then you move the top tile from the stack and put it there, and then reveal the next tile over there. So there's always going to be 2 face-up tiles for you to pick. What do these building tiles have on them? They offer you a different benefit of some kind. So for example, this one will allow, here, let me find one. So for this one, yeah, I'll use this one because this one's quite easy. This one will just allow you to pick up what looks like 2 coins. So now, not when you build it, but after you build this, you're going to also, in order to build, what you need on your player board showing in your cards is a brick icon. So in order to, and you can place these out of order. So let's suppose, for example, you have 3 cards down here and you have a total of 3 brick icons showing. It would be wise for you to remove the building from this section because you might not get 3 brick icons later on in the game. So you do not have to do these in order. You do not have to remove your architects or buildings in order. You can take whichever one you want that you have met the icons for, and which is what I did. So early on, I had 2 brick icons showing in the cards I had displayed under my board. So I built a level 2 building onto the building that I had just purchased. Then you're going to place that into the city area where you had landed. So if you again landed, where did the main board go? Here it is. So again, if you had landed over here, you are now going to place this building here with your building token on it. The next time your vizier is in this quadrant, you will get to collect whatever is on this tile. So that is why these are beneficial to build. You will not get to collect it immediately, but the next time that your vizier lands there. Another thing you can do is to go onto a palace if it's free, and there's only 1 palace circle per quadrant. If you go onto a palace, that is when you're going to again need a brick icon on your cards in your player board in order to now build a piece of the palace. So there are various palace components, as I already talked about, like foundation blocks, walls, cylinders like pillars, and then there's going to be the major components at the end over here. You're going to have your dome and your dome cap over here. And you'll see the different things you need in order to build. So in order to build, if you land your vizier on a palace spot, you need these items. One of the ways to get these items is by sailing along the river. You might might just, you know, sail on the river and collect one of those goods that you need. So there are a bunch of different goods tiles, and you would just add them to your player area and have those ready to spend. Another way is by collecting patients and students, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So there are a variety of ways for you to get the items you need in order to then turn them in, place your architect there, and then you will be able to score for the specific scoring tile that is there. Just to show you an example of a scoring tile before we continue, here is an example which will give you a certain number of points. In this case, if it's underneath the palace, you will always get 2 points for each patient you have on your player board. Because again, these are going to be underneath here, and each one will score 2 points per architect that you manage to place there in order to build the certain building piece that is there. So that's what you do if you land on a palace spot on this board. There's also something that you need to check for and pay for each time you land somewhere, which I will talk about as soon as I finish going through the different things you can land on. If you land on a book tile, you simply take the book and add it to your board. However, in order to add books to your board, you need to have feathers, or rather quills, available showing in your player area on the cards. So if you have 1 quill available, you can place it here or here. If you have 2, you can place it here. If you have 3, you can place it here, and so on. So this game gets trickier and trickier because as you are trying to form the connections in order to unlock these little bonuses, you need the icons that are visible in order to place the various types of things into your player board. So if I want to collect, for example, luxury goods, I need 1 anvil to place it here, 2 to place 1 here, 1 to place 1 here, 3 and 4. You know, and if you want to place students, you need the abacus. If you want to place a sick person, you need whatever those things are called. So again, all the different cards. Oh no, this board just broke in half. Okay, still connected here, but it just ripped over here, but not a big deal. So yeah, in order to collect, you know, the various tokens and place them on your board, you need to have the icons visible on the cards that you are playing that are visible in your board. Now with those, with collecting books, luxury items like artifacts, students, and sick people, you do not need to have the icon only on the card you just played. You can look at all the icons that are visible on all of the cards underneath your player board to see what you have available to you. Additionally, you might have earned a wild token throughout the game at some point, which you can spend as an icon. So if you did earn a wild token, those can become very beneficial, and you can turn it in to be any icon you need. And again, that will be very beneficial for placing things into the higher level slots on your player board. So again, you want to try to form connections so that you can unlock these bonuses and gain those when you get them. Now, the thing is, when you land on something in order to take it, so let's suppose I'm on the city board and I have landed over here in order to collect a book. If I am connected to a patient, I would need to move my favor tracker down by 1. Anytime you are somehow connected to a patient, you lower your favor marker by 1. If you are connected to a student, let's suppose there's a student here and I landed on a book here to collect the book, I would need to pay 1 coin for the student, which is paying tuition, and I would need to lower my favor track for the sick person by 1. Suppose you landed here because you want to build a building and you just get really lucky because there's a luxury item here and a book here. Now you can see that you're not connected to anything that you need to pay for. So you would probably want to go on this spot because, again, money is really hard to come by and favor can be really hard to come by as well in order to increase. And if you are in the negatives in favor, you are going to lose points. And if you ever needed to lower your favor and you couldn't lower it anymore, you would take a minus token, and those are going to add up at the end of the game for -3 each. So not only would you lose -8 for being at the bottom, all of your additional -3 tokens are going to take away a lot of points from you. So you definitely don't want to lose too much favor. So again, being adjacent to a sick person will cause you to lose 1 favor, and being adjacent to a student will cost you 1 coin. You could be adjacent to 2 students and need to spend 2 coins, or you could be adjacent to 2 patients and need to spend 2 favor. I mean, there might be instances where you're not adjacent to any of them, which is great. Then you don't need to spend anything. So that is why this game also gets trickier and trickier, because as you are rotating around the board, moving your vizier on your turn, you want to try to land on spots where you don't need to spend things, but you also want to collect things that you need. So for example, with the artifacts, you want to try to collect different types of artifacts in order to score points for them, because one of the scoring tiles will give you points for every different type of purple artifact you have on your board. The patients and students offer different types of goods on them, which you can then flip over in order to fulfill the building requirements of the palace. So let's suppose you had a student that had fruit on it. You could turn that student over on your board in order to spend it, in order to help you build this piece of the wall onto the main board. So that is very helpful. So that, I believe, covers the main action, but let me just double check and make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So you're going to move your vizier, you're going to take your action, collect your thing if you met the requirements to do so. I talked about the building site actions, I talked about the palace site actions. Yes, and we talked about paying tuition and gaining shame, which is when you lose favor. Now what you're going to do at the end of your turn, once you've done everything that you can do, and turns are pretty quick. There's not like a whole lot of comboing going on. You might unlock something, like for example, on your own player board, if you finally have 2 things together, you might unlock something like you might be able to move your boat 1 space. If you ever unlock a certain type of, here, I don't see it here, but there are maybe some cards that give you a certain token of some kind, like a patient or something else. If you ever gain a patient, a student, or a book, or an artifact through some other means other than actually moving your own vizier, you still need to act as though you moved your vizier when you take the token from the board that you want. So for example, if you take a certain token which is adjacent to a student, you would need to pay a coin. So there may be instances when you need to do that. So then you will select a new card to add to your hand from the visible cards on the main board. So you can take a day card or you can take a night card. So let me just show you some examples of night cards. So here is an example of a night card, which would give you 5 points if you have 4 luxury goods on your player board. So let's suppose it is now the 4th turn of the game. Now you have 3 cards underneath your player board, and 1 card is going to slide off now. So this is not going to happen for the first 3 turns of your game where you're going to have a card slide off. But on the 4th turn and every subsequent turn, you are going to have now a card slide off of your board. When a card slides off of your board, you gain what is on the bottom of the card. So the starting cards are very easy. They just give you something that you can immediately collect. And a lot of the day cards are the same way as well, but some of the day cards are harder to fulfill. No, actually, all of the day cards have some kind of requirement that you need to fulfill, actually, it turns out. So for example, here's a day card. So if this slid off of your board, if you have 2 students, you would be able to go up 1 favor and collect 1 of those special tokens. If you had 2 buildings built and this slid off of your player board, you would be able to collect any goods token you want, and you would be able to go up by 1 favor. So a bunch of different cards giving you different things once they slide off. So then they are gone. They do not come back in your hand. They will never be played again. Once a card slides off, that is it. You are not going to see that card again. If a dark blue, a nighttime card slides off, those have special scoring on them. So all of the dark blue ones, the nighttime cards, have scoring on them. If you are able to score it at the time it slides off, you get to keep that card in your personal discard pile. If you are not able to score it, it will go back in the box because you will not gain the points for this at the end of the game. So at the time that this slid off, if I had 4 different luxury goods on my player board, I would then keep this card in my personal discard pile, though I will never see it again. It will not be played again. However, if I did not have 4 luxury goods in my personal board by the time that this slid off, then it would be discarded to the box because I cannot score it. So these scoring cards can be quite difficult, and again, they're all available. You know, there's always going to be 3 face-up for everyone to select from. So there will always be 3 daytime cards and 3 nighttime cards, of course, until one of them runs out. So obviously the daytime cards are going to go first because these can be hard to score, and so you might want to wait until you start playing your nighttime cards underneath your board so that they don't end up going in the box, so that you will actually get some points for them. So the daytime cards that are visible in the market for you to select from are likely to be depleted first, and then you will start collecting nighttime cards. But you may want to collect a nighttime card early on because they also give you more icons to use at the top. So, you know, you might just forego the scoring ability knowing that by the time it slides off, you're not going to be able to score it, and you'll have to remove it into the main box so that you cannot score it at the end. But it will give you additional icons that you need, which can be very, very beneficial if you are trying to fill up your board over here or do certain things, like, for example, build more palace pieces or build more buildings on the board. So, you know, these nighttime cards can be beneficial for that reason. When is game end triggered? Also, these cards you do not need to pay for. So they're going to be visible and you just take one and then it gets refilled. Likewise with the city tiles. When the city tile is removed at the end of a player's turn, any empty spot on which there is no vizier present will be refilled with tiles from the bag. And you're not likely to ever run out of tiles, and the way that they did it is very good. So there's different types of tiles and they're split up into starting tiles, tile numbers 1, and then tiles number 2. And they're all roughly the same. It's not like tiles numbered 1 are more powerful or tiles number 2 are more powerful. They're not. It's just to ensure that once the starting tiles run out from the bag and you have one starting tile, when the number 1 tiles run out from the bag, because all the starting tiles get placed on the board to begin with. So when the bag runs out of number 1 tiles, then you put in number 2 tiles. So it's just to ensure an even distribution of the kinds of tiles you will see in this game. You know, again, the patients, the students, the artifacts, and the books. One thing I did not explain actually is the books. If you collect books, each person has library tokens. So let me just show you some library tokens that each person has. It's just a way for you to get some kind of a bonus. So each person has library tokens that look like this in their own player color. And so one will show, like, for example, 2 books on it, another one will show 3, another one will show 4, and one will show 5. So let's suppose you had 3 books on your main board. You can now take this and place it onto one of the books in the section that shows 3 book icons. So you would place it up here, and then you would be able to collect one of these tokens down here, which will permanently give you that icon. At least I think it's permanent. I'm not sure if you need to actually ever turn it in because it's not like the wild ones. I think it's permanent actually. And likewise, you know, if you go here and you had 4 books, you would place your 4 book library token here, and then you would be able to collect one of these things. So based on where you place your token. So, you know, it's first come, first serve. So that's probably a good way to get some things you need. Like at one point during the game, I really needed like influence. So I was happy that I was able to go here before someone else in order to get the 2 influence. So once someone has their library token above a certain thing, no one else can collect that thing. So that is a really good way for you to get things that you need throughout the game, because again, things can be really hard to come by in this game, especially like I've been told money, though in the beginning for me, money was easy to come by, but again, I lost very badly. So I think we've discussed all the basic actions and how the game progresses. So game end trigger. So the game end will trigger once a person has, I believe, no more cards left in hand. So once you've played all the cards from your hand, the game end will trigger. But before we go into game end, I just want to mention that you can do some bonus actions at any point during your turn. So at any point during your turn, you can buy a boat if you have money to spend and place it in the starting space of the river area, only if you do not already have another boat in the starting space of the river area. So again, you would pay coins in order to then take the cheapest boat from your player board and place that into the river. You can spend favor. You may only take this bonus action if your favor track marker is on or above the starting favor icon space. So you cannot do it if you're in the negative. And so you can spend favor in order to gain 1 coin, so 1 favor for 1 coin. You can spend 2 favor to gain a goods token of any kind, or you can spend 3 favor to gain a wild token. So this is a great way. So it says, note, this is a great way of generating money, which is otherwise tight in this game. So it says gaining and spending favor. Each time you gain a favor, move your favor marker up 1 space on the favor track. It says if you are at the top of the track and would gain favor, you should take the spend favor bonus action in order to avoid losing it. So if you are to gain favor, but you're already at the top, then it makes sense for you to use the excess and spend it immediately to gain something else. And again, if you need to go lose favor, but you're already at the bottom, you take a shame token, which is another negative 3 points at the end of the game. At any point, you can spend a wild token that has a skill requirement in order to meet a requirement that you need. For example, bricks, an abacus, a quill, or a rod in order to place a city tile onto your board. What else? And again, you can spend students and in order to meet the requirements you need in order to like build something and so on. Okay, so now at the end of the game, so the game end is triggered once everyone has played all of their cards and there's no cards remaining in hand. So what are you going to score? So you're going to score for the scoring tiles in the river area. So again, if your boat reached a dock, there would have been a scoring tile at the end of each dock port. So you will score for the number of points you have based on where you landed. So if you were the first one, you would get 3 points times whatever that scoring tile is scoring for. So you will strategize throughout this game to determine which scoring tiles you want to try to activate at the end of the game. So for example, in my game, I could have collected 5 luxury goods if someone did not screw me over, but in the end I had 4 luxury goods. So for me, it was really important for me to be able to score for luxury goods at the end of the game. So again, I'll just show you some examples of scoring tiles. So here is a scoring tile which says that you will score for each city built tile that you built onto the main board. So if you have a boat in the 3 spot and you built 2 of these buildings, then you will score 6 points for that. So you will score for all of the boats that reached ports. Then you will score, let's see, what do you score next? Again, the palace area. So for each architect that you placed in the palace area, because you helped build a certain section of the palace, then you will score for the scoring tile that is underneath the architect that you placed. And you might be able to have like 2 architects in one section. There's no limit to how many architects of yours can be in one section. So if I had been lucky enough to build 2 architects in the section that scored luxury goods, that would have been really beneficial for me. And I was actually really close to doing that, but again, I got screwed over because someone took my building spot in the very end. So you again will add up the points you have for your architects here and multiply it by the thing that is shown on your scoring tile that you are scoring for, and that's how many points you will get from the palace board. I'm not sure I mentioned this, but when you're building onto the main board, the palace section, you're always going to gain something when you place that piece there. So if you placed a pillar, for example, here, you could gain 2 favor and so on. So you're going to gain things as you are building out the palace in the center board. So yeah, so you will score for that. Let's see. If you have built a level 5 building, record the points gained for that building. So level 5 buildings are worth more points. They have some points on them and you can score for that. You will score for each knight character card in your face down discard pile. So again, we talked about when cards slide off, if you met the requirement at the time it slid off, then you will get to keep it and score it at the end of the game and get the number of points that you have from that. You will record the total points you have for artifacts you collected as shown on your player board. So when you collected artifacts, you will gain points for them. So for example, the first one is worth 1 point, the second one is worth 3 points, and so on. And again, each artifact you collect has to be different. You cannot collect the same type of artifact twice in order to get those. What else? You will score points scored or lost, record points scored or lost on your position, for your position on the favor track as shown on your player board. So again, if you are below the starting position on the favor track, you are going to lose points. And if you have shame tokens, you will lose even more points. And I believe that is it. Oh yeah, if you built either the dome piece or the cap piece, you're going to record the points gained for that. So of course, those will score you a lot of points. So let me just show you those again. Where is that board? So yeah, the dome and the caps, so they're worth 12 and 15 points respectively. So if you built those, you will score those. There is no scoring tile associated with those pieces. So yeah, I believe that is all you are scoring for at the end. So yeah. And then you will just see who has the most points, and then you win if you have the most points. It says, in the case of a tie, the tied player who scored the highest in the objective scoring tile row of the score pad wins. There was no score pad with this game, so we had to use like a separate sheet of paper, but there was no tie, so that wasn't even relevant to this game. So yeah, this is a very good, a very tight game. I really, really enjoyed it. Like, you really have to think very carefully about each action you're taking, like which card you are placing down, knowing that once that card slides off your player board, you are not going to see it again. So you are very mindful of which icons are visible on the card. And with the daytime cards, when these slide off, if you want the thing that's here, you need what's over here. So I can't gain a book unless I have 3 artifacts. So not only are you looking at the icons on the top of the card, you're looking at what's on the bottom of the card, seeing if that's something that you can achieve by the time that that card is going to slide off, which again happens beginning with the 4th turn onwards. So a very tight game in which you will strategize a lot, in which you may get messed up by other players screwing you over by taking a certain token you needed on the city board, by advancing their boat into the space that you needed, you know, because you cannot land on the same space as someone else, you know, and at the port, I mean, and some of them offer, like, for example, a wild token. And I really, on my last turn, I had this whole thing planned out for my 3rd to last turn, got screwed over by someone else. So then I re-strategized and had another great move planned for my 2nd to last turn, again, got screwed over by another player. Then on my last turn, I again re-strategized and thought I could really make something big happen in the end to get a lot of points. And yet again, I got screwed over on my last turn. So you can and you will get screwed over in this game. So while this is a game you can kind of plan ahead by looking at the cards in your hand, and you're always going to have 3 cards in your hand until the end of the game, of course, until there's no more cards for you to draft. And then once the last card from your hand has been played, then for everyone, then the game end will trigger and you will score. So, you know, you definitely want to be mindful of which cards you're playing when, and there is a certain, you know, element of being able to plan ahead, but again, you can and you will get screwed over. But I really enjoy this game. This was like by far, I think, one of Fabio Lopiano's easiest games to learn from what I have played. Like, I've played his game Merv, I've played like 3 Ring Circus, Sancore, which I believe he designed. I could be wrong on that, but I believe he designed Sancore, the Pride of Mansa Musa. Like, so I've played like so many of his games, like Kalimala, like he's a really favorite designer of mine. Like, I absolutely love his games. But this was by far the easiest of his games to play, but so much strategy, and just really, really loved it. Like, easy gameplay, but very strategic. and just a lot of fun, like a lot of fun. So I absolutely love this game and I would highly recommend it. And again, I am sponsored to do an overview video for this game, but this segment of the weekly playback was not sponsored, but I highly recommend this game. And I think that this will be a game that will be very likely to hit the table time and time again, just because of how easy it is to play, but with a lot of strategy in it. And I will say, as someone with Middle Eastern ancestry, and as someone for whom Iraq is a very important place religiously, like I am just so happy to see a game about Baghdad. Like that makes me really happy. I was actually supposed to go to Baghdad in a couple of months, but given the situation in the Middle East, my family and I postponed our plans to hopefully next year. Like I was supposed to go to Karbala, Najaf, and Baghdad in Iraq, but unfortunately those plans have been postponed. But I am very happy that I got a chance to play this game and I absolutely loved it. I think it is a big winner for Alley Cat Games, and definitely a game that I think everyone could and will enjoy. So definitely check this out when it hits Kickstarter in January. So those are my thoughts about this game, and that was Baghdad. So let's move on. Let's talk about Stamp Swap. This is a 2024 game for 1 to 5 players, designed by Paul Solomon, who is the designer of Honey Buzz, and the art is done by Connor Gillette, and it is published by Stonemaier Games. And this is a review copy, which I received from Stonemaier. So this is an open drafting, I cut, you choose tile placement game. And this was my second play of this game. The first time I played it at 4 players, and the second time I also played it at 4 players with the same group of friends, actually. So each player is going to have a collection board, which looks like this, on which you will be placing the stamps you collect. So this is what the main board looks like. It's just heavy cardstock. So you're going to be placing your stamps here. Each person's board will show something a little bit different for their exhibitor card. So for this one, at the end of each round, you're going to gain 1 point for each monument stamp you have in your collection. Someone might get it for space stamps, someone might get it for flowers, someone might get it for animals, and someone might get it for vehicles. So those are the different categories of stamps you will see in this game. So let me just pull out some cards that I'll be needing to show you guys. So each player's player aid will show you the different kinds of colors that are available of stamps, which is going to be important to know, and the different types of themes available for stamps, which is also going to be important to know. The insert for the stamps is really great because it is very helpful to have that, and so you can shuffle them and then place them into the insert and then draw them out as you need them. So the main board looks like this. And this game is played over 3 days. So it's played over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's going to be a finale card, which will have some kind of a scoring ability, which will score at the end of the game. And for each of these, you're going to have a certain kind of scoring card. So there's a different stack of color cards, theme cards, size card, and cancel cards. So you're going to shuffle those and randomly pick one for each scoring section on the board. So just to show you an example of one, let me find, no, these are specialist cards and other stuff. No, these are solo cards. Where are these scoring cards? That is very bizarre. Oh, here we go. Okay, so for example, here are the ones that would be, oh, those are finale cards. Okay, so here's one for color, for example. So if you have one color so you'll choose one color and then you would gain 3 points per separate group on your player board. And a group is a group of stamps that are adjacent to each other, orthogonally adjacent. So there's different kinds of color scoring cards, and I'll explain how you decide which one you're going to score at the end of the round, and so on. So then there's one for shapes. So again, a bunch of different scoring cards for each type of scoring card. There's theme sets, so theme sets of all 5 themes, so 9 points per set. So, you know, again, and then canceled stamps and so on. So you're going to select a scoring card randomly for each of those scoring things on the board. So how does this game work? So you have these cards which will determine what you are going to be putting out. So in a 4-player game, you are going to have select 4 of these cards, which you would have shuffled before. So you have a stack of these cards, and you're going to lay out 4 cards and then you are going to place out the stamps that are visible on these cards, and you will see which ones go face up and which ones go face down. So after you've selected, randomly drawn these cards, you're now going to place them out. So this one will show you need like one face up rectangle of that size, then one face down, one face up, one face down, one face up, one face up, one face down. And you're going to go through and place out everything that is shown on these cards. And there may even be some specialist cards that you place out, which are like characters with special abilities, or exhibitor cards. So those are going to get shuffled as well. And sometimes those will come out and give you some kind of special ability or another kind of scoring thing that will happen. So then after all of those things have been placed, there's always going to be one rule that is in place for that specific round. Which changes up the game a little bit. So then in turn order, you're going to select one of the things that is available to select, and you're going to place it on the bottom section of your player board in your daily collection section. So you'll place the first one here, the second one here, the third one here, the fourth one here, the fifth one here, the sixth one here. And it's not necessary that you will always select 6, because again, the rule for the round might change that. After everyone has collected their things, so you go in turn order, so 1, then 1, then 1, then 1, then 2, then 2, then 2, then 2, and so forth. Then you can reserve a stamp into your reserve section, except for rare stamps. Rare stamps are these really shiny, beautiful stamps that have chocolate on them, and they are worth a lot of points. They are just straight up worth 10 points. They do not count for any other category though. They do not count towards like color or, for example, a certain type of theme. They are simply rare stamps, and you will simply get the points that are listed on them when it comes to scoring and end game scoring. So after everyone has collected their stamps, you then place something into reserve, again, except for a rare stamp. Then you're going to divide what you have into 2 groups. And if you collected anything face down, it would remain face down. Then, starting with the first player, they will get to select which group they want from another player. Once they have selected something from one player, that person's other group then becomes theirs. Then that person will select from someone else, and so on. There's special rules for what happens if one person, which happened to me in the last game I played, is stuck with both of their groups because no one selected anything. And it happened to me at the most inopportune time in the game. Because there were some negative point stamps in the 2 groups. So unfortunately, at the most inopportune time, I ended up getting stuck with both of my groups at one point. So after we've done this whole like I cut you choose and picking out which group you want, and then you have your stamps, then you can place them onto your stamp sheet, and then you will score at the end of that round. So now after you've taken the time to arrange your stamps as you need to in order to make sure you will score a certain number of points in that round, the first thing you will do is score for your exhibitor card at the end of each round. So in this case, this person would get 1 point for each monument stamp they have, and it doesn't matter if they're adjacent or not. Then you are going to place one of your ticket tokens, and each player has 3 ticket tokens. So because there's only 3 rounds in the game, you're going to place one of your ticket tokens underneath one of these scoring cards. So you will not get to score all 4 scoring cards in a game. You will only ever get to score 3 of them. So early on, you might want to score something that's not going to get you a lot of points, but will get you some points, because you might want to save the thing that is going to get you the most points to score in the last round. So you will place your ticket underneath the one you want to score, and then immediately gain the points based on the scoring that is written on that card. And after everyone has done that, then you will, prepare for the next round, and so on. There are these special exhibitor specialist cards, which we talked about. When you collect a specialist card, that card is immediately in your player area, and if the ability is able to be activated before it gets split up into your piles, you can activate its ability. But then once you start splitting up the piles of, for the I cut you choose part, then it's possible that someone else may get that specialist. But as long as it's in your player area before you divide it into a pile, if the part of the, if like, for example, it's during the collect phase, and you have the specialist in your player area, because even though you collected it just that round, you could still activate it. So it says once during each collect phase, you may add 2 items, stamps or attendee cards face up from the supply to the pool. So like, let's suppose I collected this card during the collect phase. Now it's already in my area. So I could actually just already activate this. But then when it comes to splitting up everything I collected, I'm going to need to split it up into one of the 2 groups. So that's how you go until the final show. Then in the final show, you are going to also score for the finale card that is on the board, and then again, place your ticket underneath one of the things, scoring cards, and score points from them. And then there are forever stamps. So forever stamps are these really tiny little stamps that help you to fill in single tiny squares on your board. Whoever has the most of them will get 10 points. Whoever has the second most will get 6 points, and whoever has the third most will get 3 points. Then you will look at the individual values of the stamps in your album, and you will score those, gain points for those. You will gain points for your specialist cards you have. And then again, I already said the finale contest card. And then whoever has the most points will win. So it's a really easy game. I personally feel like it goes by too quickly. Like, I really wish that there was one more round. I really feel like you don't even get to really fill up your album with stamps. Like, there's like quite a bit of empty space at the end of the game. I really wish that there was one more round in this game. I mean, maybe you could house rule that. You would just need to keep track, but then everyone would get to score all 4 scoring cards. So maybe that's why they made it only 3 rounds, so that you do not get to score all 4 scoring cards, because then that might be too easy, I guess. I guess, you know, part of the appeal of this game is, you know, really thinking about what you want to score and when. And that's part of the strategy of this game as well. So yeah, so there is that. If you, I guess I won't talk about this first player token, but that's also an item you can collect. And if you do, then if it ends up in your 2 piles that you want, that you ended up getting at the during the swapping phase, then you would gain 2 points when it comes to scoring. But then it goes back into the area where people can select it in the next round. So yeah, so that's how the first player marker works. So yeah, so that is Stamp Swap. So a really easy game to learn with a bit of strategy, and it is fun, and I just absolutely love the stamps in this game. So I should probably show you some of the stamps since we're here. But that's part of, like, it's really one of my favorite parts of this game, is just like looking at all the different stamps, especially the animal ones. I really love the animal stamps in this game. So let me see if I can find you a couple to show you. Let's see if I can find one here. Oh my gosh, like literally the first one I picked up was an elephant. I kid you not. Like, I just randomly divided it and it was an elephant. So definitely meant to be. Oh, here's a little hippo. Well, not little, but you know, super cute. So yeah, I absolutely love the different types of stamps. Here is a space stamp, which is worth -2 points, which I actually had in the game that I played. Yeah. So yeah, so that is how Stamp Swap works. So yeah, it's just a pretty light, easy game. It's a good family game. So if you're looking for a good family game to buy someone for Christmas, even though by the time you're watching this, there's only like 2 days left, you might want to consider this game. Again, this was a review copy from Stonemaier Games. So thank you to Stonemaier Games for sending this to me. So that was Stamp Swap. So let's move on. Some other games I played recently, which I'm really not going to go into right now, are Bomb Busters. So I played this at Millennium Games' Play Something New. Interesting kind of deduction game. So yeah, so I'm surprised by what a high rating it has, to be honest, because I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was like that good. So yeah, so it's a deduction game in which people have like different like numbers in front of them that only they can see, and you're supposed to try to like guess what number someone has and try to avoid blowing up. And there's like different kinds of abilities that might unlock that you can use. Like, I thought it was okay, but I really don't see the mega love for this game. Like, I don't understand it. And I saw that it was in some people's like top 10 list of 2024, which again, I quite frankly don't understand. I mean, I enjoyed it. I would not like think it's the most amazing deduction game out there. It's a different kind of a deduction game, I guess, but yeah, so maybe it's worth checking out. I wouldn't mind playing it again if someone wanted to play it. But I did play a 5-player game of that, and I enjoyed my play of it. But again, I don't think it's like the most amazing game out there. Another game I played is like a really old, like easy kind of like classic game, I guess you could call, is Sequence. So a friend of mine brought over Sequence and I played a 4-player game of that. Just a kind of interesting little game in which you're trying to like place down tokens by playing cards from your hand, and you're trying to get like 2 rows of 5 tokens in your team's color before the other team gets it. Very, very basic game in which you can't like communicate, but you kind of are trying to get you and your partner to get 5 tokens in a row, but you can also play certain cards that might get rid of other people's tokens, the other team's tokens and stuff. So super basic game. So that was another game I played recently. Games I'm backing, still not backing anything, which quite frankly is a really nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to know that I am not backing anything and spending money that I should not be spending. So yeah, so that's quite nice. So let's move on to games that I have received. So one of my Kickstarters came in, and that was the trio of games from Bitewing Games, which includes Bebop, Shuffle and Swing, and Cat Blues, the Big Gig. So the one that I was most looking forward to, I guess should be no surprise, is a Bebop, because the art is done by Weberson Santiago, and as you guys know, he is like one of my favorite board game artists. And this just seems like a really cool game about a jazz club. And of course, I went and backed the all-in deluxe edition. So here's a cool bag for all the dice, and it's got different colored dice in it with different cool symbols on them. Really nice dice. Each player has different colored tokens. So I think these are the pretty colors. It's kind of like a lime color and a teal color. And then they have some boring colors. They have white and gray. But I know that that's supposed to go with like the Art Deco style of this time period, but still wish the colors like were a little bit more interesting than gray and white for the other ones. There are these different player screens for the different players. They all look the same, I guess. The rule book, really nice paper for the rule book. And then there's, so I don't know if it's only the deluxe version that came with like 2 different boards, which are both double-sided. So each board has like a different like thing that you can play on it, which is super cool. So here's one board, and then let me show you the other board. So here is the other board, which on one side is a lime green, and then on the other side is orange. So there's like different kinds of themes, and I think that they're supposed to represent different jazz clubs, so different kinds of games. So I believe each one has like a different map on it and stuff that you can play. So I am very much looking forward to playing this game. And there's a bunch of different kinds of tokens in this bag here. There's the plain white bag. But I am super duper excited to play this game. Like, this is the one that out of the trio of games I am most looking forward to playing. So I hope I will get to play it on a Monday nights, tomorrow night. I really hope so. So yeah, so that is one of the games in the trio that I backed. Another one is Shuffle and Swing, which has like a bunch of different like mice, or maybe they're rats. I can't tell. I think they're one or the other. I don't know. And about swing dancing, I guess. It says Shuffle and Swing, and their fabulous factory of marvelous musical gadgets for giants. Okay. Oh, it's by the same designer as Bebop. Interesting. Robert Hovakimian. So yeah, I totally butchered that, I'm sure. So again, I backed the deluxe version, but here are like all the player components for the pink player. The colors, the player colors in this one are better. So here's purple, pink, like bright lime green, and this pretty blue color. So really like the player colors in this one. Here are some like tiles that I think you'll be placing out. Here are some deluxe cheese components, and then the regular tokens, because these are supposed to be unlimited. So I decided to, of course, keep the non-deluxe ones in case the deluxe ones run out and people need them. I don't know what these are. Ladders, I really don't know. And then these look like milk bottles, I guess. And then just a bunch of different kinds of tokens and stuff like that. I don't know how this board is put together, but there's like one thing that looks like this. So I'm assuming you're putting stuff in there. And then there are a bunch of these that you can choose from. I think these are individual player boards, though I'm really not sure because I just do not know how this game plays. And these are double-sided, so there's like different instruments on each side. So like this one has horns on one side and drums on the other. So that is pretty cool. So yeah, and it does come with this like box so you can protect the corners. So I don't know if that's meant to be discarded, but I figured I would just keep it to protect the corners. Yeah. And then I think these are individual player boards actually too. So yeah, so that is one of the games that arrived as part of the trio. Oh, and as the player aids, they have these like cardboard tiles, which are really nice. Like, I'm not sure if I've ever played another game that has like cardboard tiles for player aids. So really high production value for these games. And then finally Cat Blues, which is a new edition of a Rainer Knizia game. And this looks really cool to me because of course I love cats, and it's got a whole bunch of different cat cards, which I haven't shuffled yet. So, but you know, so you'll see that all the colors are still together. So there's a whole bunch of different cards. That's just like half of them. And then the deluxe version comes with these like metal coins. They're like tip coins or something. One thing that's interesting is that there's certain components for this game that they did not deluxify. So you will have these deluxe coins in 3 different colors, but then there are components that were not deluxified that I think would have been cool if they had been, because you're going to be using these throughout the game. So there's a bunch of these different kinds of tokens that are not deluxified that you'll be using as well. But the deluxified ones, there's like blue, purple, and then white. And then 3 special metal ones that are, or 4 rather, and then 4 of these. Let me just show you. These are like big tips. Yeah. So yeah, so this looks like some kind of an auction game, I think. So looking forward to checking this out as well. On Black Friday, which I know was a couple of weeks ago now, I actually purchased 2 games. One from the used games section of Millennium Games, which is Chai Garam. Chai means tea and garam means warm, so this really means like warm tea, so chai garam. So the art style is really unique, and I'm just really excited to play this. And this is the deluxe edition, and unfortunately I left a lot of the deluxe pieces over there, so I can't show them to you now, but it came with so much stuff that does not fit in the box. Like it comes with these like cardboard like standee things, which are really annoying, by the way, and I hope we do not need to use them in the game because they just do not stay put together. So it came with these cardboard standee things, and the cardboard pieces just keep on falling apart because whoever thought of, you know, how to assemble those did not think through how to make them. Like certain pieces just fall right off, and just very annoying. So I really hope that we don't need to use those actually. Another thing that it came with is a bunch of different plastic cups, which are over there, so I forgot to bring those. It came with some card holders, but again, I'm really hoping that we do not need to use the standees. I really, really hope we don't. So yeah, so let's see what else is in this box, because I actually haven't taken a proper look. So it looks like you need to put together the main board, and then there's like a bunch of these. It looks like they're supposed to be like different tea boxes or something, like Darjeeling tea, and there's like a whole bunch of them. So yeah, some kind of other boxes. I don't know if these are supposed to be assembled just to hold cards. I really have no clue. Some kind of metal tokens, some other tokens. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see what's down here. I'm really wondering if this was even played, like, because this has not been opened. So I wonder if this was played. Maybe these are player boards. I do not know. Some reference cards and some other boards. So yeah, I mean, this looks like it was unplayed, which I can totally understand because I've totally backed games on Kickstarter that have not been played yet. And that I actually got rid of before ever playing them. So sometimes you just, by the time you get a game, you just decide you're no longer interested in it. And that's happened to me a number of times. So if this is someone's unplayed game, I can totally understand that. Like, I can sympathize. There's a bunch of different cards, like there's just a lot of different cards, so I don't, but yeah, so like different kinds of customer cards and so on. So yeah, I'll just show you the inside of the box so I don't have to, but yeah. So yeah, so that is the box. So yeah, and the rule book, and again, it came with some other deluxe components, which do not fit in this box, which I think is kind of a shame. Like, I think if you're going to make a deluxeified version of a game, everything should fit in the box, preferably. That's just my preference. Another thing I picked up on Black Friday is the expansion to the new edition of Ex Libris, because I really like Ex Libris, though I haven't played it in many years, many years, but I had purchased the new edition, so I also have the old edition as well, and I purchased this to go with the new edition. So it would be nice to play that at some point in time. So those are my new arrivals, I think. I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but I think that's it. So let's move on. So it's completely dark outside now, and I think my lighting is still okay, so that's great news. So good thing I actually bought a new ring light to put in front of me, because otherwise this would not have worked, shooting a video this late in the day. So yeah. So games I'm culling, I haven't done in a while a giveaway. So I do want to do a giveaway since it's been a while, and so I feel really bad saying this, but the first two people who won the giveaway, I still have their games and haven't shipped it to them, because both of them were like, oh, if we want to buy something from you, maybe you can ship it together. And I really, I know I say this and I know I sound like a broken record, but I really need to start culling games. Like, my game room is a disaster. Like, I have a library downstairs with lots of shelving, which are completely filled with games. I have some games and a few stacks downstairs. Then my game room, which I'm sitting in right now, like, you know, that's filled with shelving, which is filled with games. There's shelves in there, which are filled with games. There's a calyx over there filled with games on top. The entire other half of this table is stacked with games, and there are games all over the ground in piles, around that part of the room, so you can't even walk there. So it is a complete disaster, and I really need to start culling my collection and actually trying to get some of my money back. So I am really going to be dedicated to forming a sell list and trying to get rid of some of these games. But I actually forgot to bring the game that I'm planning on giving away. So 1 second, I will be back in 1 second. Okay, so this video's giveaway, and I know I don't do a giveaway in every video, it's just because I really need to plan in advance for it, but I hope I will start doing them on a more regular basis, and I hope to come up with a big list of games that I plan on selling. So if you are someone who has won a giveaway, and of course, the rule is that you don't have to pay for the game, but you do need to pay for the shipping. So if you want to wait until I, have my big list of games that I'm planning on selling, in case there's something else you want to add to it, and then pay for that game and then pay for the shipping together, you are more than welcome to do that. And again, the rule is, in order to enter one of these giveaways, you need to have commented on a video of mine before, and of course be subscribed to my channel. So this giveaway is going to be for Forever Home. So this is a tile placement game from Birdwood Games. This was a review copy I received, which is why I think it was a review copy, or did I back this? I think it was a review copy. Yeah, so this was a review copy that I received, and I've played it twice. I think it's a perfectly fine tile placement game, but not one that I really feel the need to keep in my collection, so I'm going to be giving it away. So if you want a chance to win this game, if you've already won one of the channel giveaways, then unless no one enters, you won't win this one. But feel free to enter, because if no one else enters, then happy to, select another winner who's already won before. And again, I've already done 2 giveaways, so not too many yet. But if you want to enter to win this game, please leave a comment below telling me your favorite type of dog. And if your favorite type of dog is a mutt, that is perfectly fine. Like just a mutt that you can get from a shelter, then that is very admirable. And you can leave that in the comment below as well. So I will tell you that I do have some favorite types of dogs. So my favorite types of dogs are Samoyeds, which I absolutely love, and I know that is a special breed of a dog, so it would be very expensive to get. Not a shelter dog, you're probably not going to find a Samoyed in a shelter. Another kind of dog that I do love that you might find in a shelter, because they're super high maintenance, and sometimes people get those dogs and then end up giving them to shelters, is Huskies. So I absolutely love Huskies, and I recently saw, not super recently now, it was back in November, I saw a dog that was a mix between Pomeranian is that how you say it? Pomeranian dog and a husky. And oh my God, it was so beautiful. There was 2 of them and they were just so freaking beautiful. I just did not want to go like leave them. I met them at a coffee shop, so it's not like, you know, it's weird, I know. but I just wanted to like stay in their presence forever and ever. They were just so beautiful and so cute. So I just, you know, there's so many kinds of dogs I love. But if you want a chance to win this game, then please leave a comment below telling me what type of dog is your favorite, and you need to leave that by next, let's say, let me give a deadline in order to leave that comment. So let's say that the deadline is the end of December 28th. So leave a comment by the end of December 28th telling me what your favorite type of dog is in order to be eligible to win this game, and I will randomly select a winner from those who are eligible. And again, to be eligible, you need to be subscribed to my channel and you need to have previously commented on a video of mine somewhere. And the reason I do that is so I can reward those who actually watch my content and engage with my content. So yeah, so this is a giveaway for Forever Home, and yeah, good luck. I think it's a good game. Again, just not one I feel the need to keep in my collection right now, and I just have way too many games, and that's why I'm planning on giving it away. Okay, so let's move on. So I haven't given a cat update in a while. There's not too much to say really, just continuing to feed them even when it's super duper cold outside and everything is frozen and I need to shovel a lot. So it's been like that the last few days where it's been very snowy and it takes time to shovel everything, and then you know, it takes time to try to like get the frozen water out of their bowls. Like I sometimes need to go and find pavement away from where the water bowls actually are, and then like throw the bowl down really hard on the pavement in order to make the ice inside crack and come out. Like that's how I have to get the water out of their frozen water bowls. And of course in the wintertime I go with like warm to hot water to then put in these bowls so that they won't immediately freeze, and it makes me so happy. Like one of the things that makes me the happiest in the wintertime is when I see the cats drinking the warm water out of the bowls after I fed them and have put in new water, and I go and sit in my car and I kind of like spy on them for a little bit, and I love seeing them drinking water, like the warm water, because I imagine it's kind of like drinking tea for them. Like they don't get to drink stuff that is typically warm, right? So it's like them drinking tea, like it would be equivalent to us drinking tea in order to keep warm on a really cold day. So I just really love seeing them drink the warm water right as soon as it's available for them to drink. Yeah, so just, you know, I'm glad to see that they're still out and about and doing well despite the very frigid temperatures that we've been having in the last few days. So I do worry about them a lot, and I still love them a lot. I mean, I'll never stop loving them. But anyway, here are some winter pictures. And again, some of them are taken from far away because at this point I'm in my car because you know, I have to be out for a little bit of a longer time and my fingers start to freeze even though I'm wearing gloves and wearing plastic gloves over my cloth gloves. But yeah, it can get very cold. So yeah, so just keep these cats and all the stray animals in your thoughts and prayers during the winter months. And if you have the ability, you know, try to help animals in your area. So I even keep a bowl of water in my backyard and I see so many animals drinking from it. Like I see so many squirrels and birds and other animals drinking from this bowl of water. So it's just minimal effort for you to just do something that can make a difference for the animals in your area. And if you see an animal in need, again, don't ever assume that someone else is going to take care of that animal. You can be that someone. If everyone else just left it to other people to take care of things and take care of animals, then nothing would ever get done. So be that person who's actually going to do something and make a difference. So yeah, so that is just my little spiel for today. So let's move on. So let's talk about Fiction Book Club. So I did read the next 2 chapters, yay, so I'm all caught up. So thank you for waiting for me, Sandra. So I read chapters 2 and 3. So I thought they were really fun and, well, not necessarily fun, but really good and really interesting. And I'm very intrigued. And a part of me is really wondering whether this book is based on actual history. Like I actually don't know much about the Muslim empire when it was in like Spain and that part of the world. And though I know that there are plenty of remnants of the Muslim empire being in that part of the world, which I would love to see someday. Like I would really love to see the mosque in Cordoba. Like that is on my bucket list, my wish list of one of the places I want to see someday. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this book, and yeah, I think it's really good. I mean, it's, you know, I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen next, though, you know, it's not like there's like a cliffhanger at the end of chapter 3 or anything, but really good so far. One thing I did want to comment on was, let's see, oh, the dog. So this is one thing that I really wanted to comment on. So there is a dog in this book, and you see how Fatima is worried about this dog and worried that, you know, the people in the palace are going to hurt the dog. And I find it really interesting that the author then shows that when the Catholics come to the palace, that it's the Catholic lady who ends up harming this dog. Like, she kicks this poor dog, and then the dog is like whimpering and in pain, and then Fatima goes and picks up this dog, realizes how starving he is, and takes the dog to her bed and falls asleep next to him because his body is really warm. Like, I absolutely loved that this book showed this Muslim woman taking care of this dog and showing compassion for this dog. As a Muslim woman, I will say that there are a lot of ignorant Muslims in this world who unfortunately do abuse dogs and do think that dogs are dirty and think that it's okay to hurt them, which it is absolutely not. So I will say, as a Muslim, it is a fact that we will be judged for how we treat every living thing on Judgment Day. That's the Muslim belief. Like, I know if you're atheist, obviously you're not going to believe in Judgment Day, but we as Muslims do believe that on Judgment Day we will be judged for every living, how we treated every living being, and that even includes trees. Like, there are hadith and traditions and sayings of the Prophet which say that we will be judged even for how we treated the trees and plants around us, and that they will even speak up either for us or against us on Judgment Day. So for all those people, those Muslims around the world who do mistreat dogs, and it's not just Muslims who do mistreat animals, of course, but in Islam, unfortunately, there is this misconception that dogs are dirty, which actually, if you know, a lot of Muslims are ignorant, and it's actually not the case that you can't actually have a dog. You are absolutely allowed to have a dog in Islam. I won't go into like, you know, I won't go into jurisprudence too much, but basically the rule is that because people don't want dogs in Islamic societies because they believe that they're unclean, and then it would make prayer very difficult. Like, you'd have to have a separate room for prayer, make sure the dog doesn't enter that room when you do your ablutions for prayer. You'd have to make sure you don't touch the dog, and so on. However, the rule is actually this. So dogs are not unclean. You would have to redo your ablutions only if you touch any bodily fluids from a dog, like its saliva or urine, or if you touch the fur of a dog that is wet. If you happen to touch dry fur of a dog, that does not make you suddenly unclean. So it is very possible to have a pet dog and take care of a dog. And in fact, there's another hadith, which is, again, is a saying or tradition of the Prophet, where I think I talked about this on my channel before, where there was a prostitute. So the story goes that there was a prostitute in town, and she died, and no one wanted to perform her funeral rites. And then the Prophet himself, Prophet Muhammad, decided to perform her funeral rites, and people went up to him and said, "Why are you performing the funeral rites of a prostitute? Like, you know, what's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah." And he said, "God instructed me to." And the story is that God instructed him to do the funeral rites of this prostitute, even though she lived in a way which was not in accordance with Islam, because this woman had one day given water to a thirsty dog that no one else was helping. So that is the story. And there are other stories about dogs in Islam as well. And animals are not to be mistreated. So to me, I was really happy to see that this book showed Fatima taking care of the dog, picking him up, and realizing that he or she needed help and was injured. And it actually showed the Catholic woman who was actually being really abusive towards this poor dog in the palace. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens with this dog. But yeah, really curious to see what happens, and curious whether this book is based on some kind of history. I, again, don't know about the history of this time period or location, so very intrigued, and might do a little bit of, of deep diving on Wikipedia, or go down a rabbit hole to learn more about this time period and location and Islamic history in this period and location of the world. So yeah, so let's for next week read the next 2 chapters. So let's read chapters 4 and 5 for next week. So tell me what you found interesting in the next 2 chapters that we were supposed to read. So let me know what you liked most about chapters 2 and 3, and let's read chapters 4 and 5 for next week. So that was Fiction Book Club. So let's move on. Okay, so let's move on to nonfiction book club, and we were supposed to finish this book, which I did, and I really want to focus on the Gaza mythologies because I think that's very relevant to today. So the only thing I'm going to say about the chapter, which is the Oslo mythologies, is that the mythology was that it's Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians who stopped the peace process from happening and who caused the Oslo Accords to fail. And the author, who again is a anti-Zionist Israeli Jewish author, he talks about how that is untrue, and again, it was the Israelis to blame for what happened. So the only thing that I'm going to really highlight, and again, I highlighted a lot in this chapter, but the only thing that I'm going to highlight in this video right now is this. He says we should therefore we should acknowledge that the Oslo process was not a fair and equal pursuit of peace, but a compromise agreed to by a defeated colonized people. As a result, the Palestinians were forced to seek solutions that went against their interests and endangered their very existence, as they have always been forced to do. Like time and time again, we've seen in history that the Palestinians are forced to just basically give up basic human rights. And the Israeli government is always very deceptive and manipulative and puts on this show of actually caring about peace, but everything, its actions always prove otherwise. And this chapter, the Oslo mythologies, really proved that really well, and I highly recommend that everyone read it. But again, I'm not going to spend more time on it because I really want to go on to the Gaza mythologies, which is very relevant to today. So the Gaza mythologies explores 3 different myths that he wants to break down. So the first myth is that Hamas is a terrorist organization, which he breaks down. The second myth examines concerns that the Israeli decision that created the vacuum in the Gaza Strip, which enabled Hamas not only to win the elections in 2006, but also to oust Fatah by force in the same year. Examines concerns. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So the second myth is that this withdrawal of Israel from the Gaza Strip after nearly 40 years of occupation was a gesture of peace or reconciliation, which was reciprocated by hostility and violence. So that is the second myth he breaks down. And the third and last myth he breaks down in this chapter is Israel's claims that its actions since 2006 have been part of a self-defensive war against terror. And he calls it an incremental genocide of the people of Gaza, which we have very much seen happening since last year. It is absolutely a genocide and not so much incremental anymore. So he talks about the formation of Hamas and what led Hamas to be successful, and he basically breaks down how it is not a terrorist organization, which many people are obviously going to disagree with, because in the West you have been told time and time again that Hamas is a terrorist organization. Does it use terror to achieve some of its goals? Is sending missiles into Israel terror? Yes, but at the same time, those missiles hardly ever kill anyone. What happened on October 7th? Was that terror? Yes, by definition, it was terrorism. But again, by definition, everything that Israel has ever done is terrorism to a much greater scale. But again, however, the UN does recognize the right of occupied peoples to use force in order to defend themselves and in order to try to get the basic rights that they deserve. But basically, he goes into how Hamas came into being and even how Israel at some points even encouraged Hamas to exist, because when they were trying to do away with the secular groups in Palestine, they thought that by emboldening a group like Hamas, that it would help them achieve their goals. In hindsight, that was obviously a wrong move for Israel, and they regretted it later on. But you can see in this chapter how Israel even helped Hamas to become popular at some points in time. So, I highlighted so much in this chapter, but obviously I cannot go over all of it. But just to go along with what I was saying, so it said in 2009, Enver Cohen, who served in the Gaza Strip, so he said, he told the Wall Street Journal, Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation. So he explains how Israel helped the charity Al-Mujamma al-Islamiyya, the Islamic Society founded by Sheikh Ahmed Yassin in 1979, to become a powerful political movement out of which the Hamas movement emerged in 1987. So this chapter, explains why Israel did that, and so on. So it says, the Israelis hoped that through his charity and educational work, this charismatic leader would counterbalance the power of the secular Fatah in the Gaza Strip and beyond. It is noteworthy that in the late 1970s, Israel, like the United States and Britain, saw secular national movements whose absence today they lament as the worst enemy of the West. So yeah, and even with Israel's blessing and support, the society that opened up a university, there was an independent school system, a network of clubs and mosques, and so on, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then it talks about how Hamas captured the hearts of many Muslims because of the failure of the Oslo Accords and so on, and the failure of modernity to find secular modernity to find solutions for the Palestinians. And it says the fact that Arafat was delegitimized by Israel in the West while Abu Mazen was accepted by them as Palestinian president reduced his popularity among the younger generation in the de-developed rural areas and the impoverished refugee camps. There was a second intifada and so on. So it's basically talking about why Hamas came to be, and it's basically because of how the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, kept on failing the Palestinians. And, then Hamas even ended up winning an election. And then it talks a little bit about like the kind of civil war that happened between the different parties in Palestine. Until Hamas finally basically, was no longer a part of the West Bank and became only a part of, only controlling Gaza, and how that came to be. So it talks a lot about that. One thing, let's see. So it talks about the creation of the Strip and how it was created in the last days of the 1948 war. One thing I want to read about this, it says, within 2 decades, this once pastoral coastal part of southern Palestine became one of the world's most densely inhabited areas without the economic and occupational infrastructure to support it. It talks a lot about Gaza and how it came to be. And yeah, and it's just really enlightening, and I recommend that everyone reads this. It says, Israel attempted to fashion the Strip as an enclave which the peace camp hoped would become either autonomous or a part of Egypt. Meanwhile, the nationalist right-wing camp of Israel wished to include it in the Eretz Israel they dreamed of establishing in place of Palestine. So it talks about the different groups within Israel and what they hoped for Palestine to, what they hoped would happen in Palestine. One interesting thing that just kept on coming up in this chapter was that when Israelis protest in Israel and they're protesting their own government, concern of what's going on in Palestine is very minimal. Like, one thing he really highlights in this chapter is despite where people are in the political spectrum in Israel, the concern for how Israel deals with the problem of Palestine is very low on their list of concerns. Like, they're more concerned with the economy. They're more concerned with, their own well-being in Israel and not what's happening in the West Bank or Gaza. And that, I think, was really interesting and very important for this author. I'm glad he highlighted it. It's really important to know, because we did see protests even after the genocide began last October, and we've seen protests in Israel, and people have sometimes mistakenly attributed those protests to being against the genocide, which is not the case at all, actually. So yeah. So he talks about the historical context in which the violent clashes that happened between Israel and Hamas should be viewed. So it says, let's see. So Israel controlled, as it still does today, the water and electricity infrastructure. Since 1993, it has used this control to ensure the well-being of the Jewish settler community on the one hand, and to blackmail the Palestinian population into submission on the other. Like, what have people like me been saying since last October, since before last October, that, Israel controls Palestinians' water and electricity. They have been without water and electricity. They literally have nothing. It's just absolutely no way to live. It is no way to live in such a small area of land that is so densely populated, and then combine that with no water and electricity. What are you going to get? You're going to get disease. You're going to get famine, or in this case, even forced starvation by Israel, and so on. So it says, it is in this historical context that we should view the violent clashes between Israel and Hamas since 2006. We must reject the description of Israeli actions as part of the war against terror or as a war of self-defense. And he says, nor should we accept the depiction of Hamas as an extension of Al-Qaeda, as a part of the Islamic State network, or as a mere pawn in a seditious Iranian plot to control the region. If there is an ugly side to Hamas's presence in Gaza, it lies in the group's early actions against other Palestinian factions in the years 2005 to 2007. So at this point, this is where he actually goes into the clashes with Fatah. So I actually said that a little bit early. And then it talks about some assassinations that Israel conducted and so on. Let's see. It talks about Israel's hope for a creation of a greater Israel, which would include half the West Bank and a small part of the Gaza Strip, thus amounting to almost 90% of historical Palestine. So a greater Israel, blah, blah, blah. In this vision, the Palestinians in Israel could either join the millions of refugees languishing in the camps or submit to an apartheid system of discrimination and abuse. So, when you basically give people no choice, what do you expect to happen? What do you expect to happen except support for a militant group that is going to fight for their rights because every other group, every supposed negotiation process has failed them? So that's what's going to happen. So then there's this talk of a roadmap to peace during in 2004 when Bush was president. Blah blah blah. And again, throughout this chapter, you see and you hear about how the United States and the European Union just turn a blind eye to whatever Israel does. So moving on, I'm just gonna go on to the parts where you start learning about all the attacks that Israel has done, and bombardments after bombardment after bombardment. So Sharon's removal of some settlers, which people have mistakenly seen as an attempt at peace, when you learn that the reasons behind it are sinister. So why were these Israeli settlers removed? They were removed so that Gaza could be bombarded, so that they could easily start just killing masses of the civilian population without injuring Jewish Israeli settlers at the same time. And this chapter basically outlines all of that, explains all of that really well, and how that was the reason behind Sharon saying that he would remove settlers from Gaza. He says the author says there was a need to contain Hamas in Gaza, but there was no rush to find a solution in the West Bank. Let's see. So sorry, above that it says so let's see. Sharon had to deal with Gaza in one of two ways: either clear out the settlers so that he could retaliate against Hamas without the risk of hurting Israeli citizens, or depart altogether from the region in order to refocus his efforts on annexing the West Bank or parts of it. So Sharon orchestrated a charade that everyone fell for. Let's see. Again, I've highlighted parts that show that Israelis kind of reached a consensus about how the Palestinians should be dealt with and so on. Jewish society in Israel became effectively silent, giving governments since 2005 carte blanche to pursue any policy towards the Palestinians they deem fit. Again, then it goes into talking about how, Americans just kind of got used to Israel using collective punishment and doing house demolitions and arrests without trial. So it says that they all got used to this. Different governments just even stopped speaking up. And Israel kind of would experiment and see how far it could go. How far could it push the world and continue to commit these really horrible atrocities and without any pushback from the world. Like every time they would have a bombardment, it was just a kind of like another experiment for them to see how much they could do without getting any pushback. So yeah, he talks about how it only took like a couple of hours at one point for America to give Israel the go-ahead with one of its plans. Let's see. I'm gonna skip ahead. Yeah, so basically, you know, that first part of the chapter shows how the withdrawal was in no way part of a peace process. It was in order to protect the Israelis so that they could then bombard Gaza and kill as many Palestinians as they wanted. So, you know, he broke all of that down in the chapter, and I thought that part of the chapter, and I thought it was very good. So the next part of the chapter is, was the war on Gaza a war of self-defense? And this is where he starts going through all the various operations that Israel has conducted. And, you know, he talks about Operation Cast Lead in 2009, and how he, you know, views everything that Israel has been doing as an incremental genocide. Now, again, this book was written, I believe, in 2017. It is no longer incremental. Yes, this was first published in 2017. What we have been seeing since last October is not incremental. I mean, this is full-on genocide, as many humanitarian organizations and organizations that actually study genocide have said it is. Amnesty International calls it a genocide. Like, so many organizations call it a genocide. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but B'Tselem, which is like an organization based in Israel, which is actually a conservative organization, has also, you know, in this chapter, he talks about how even they have pointed out how brutal Israel is, and the tactics it uses against Palestinians. So yeah, he breaks down all the different operations that Israel committed and how many innocent Palestinians were killed. So it says here, according to B'Tselem in 2006, 141 children were among the dead. Most of the casualties were from the Gaza Strip, where Israeli forces demolished almost 300 houses and crushed entire families. This means that since 2000, almost 4,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces, half of them children. More than 20,000 were wounded. And again, before the genocide began last year, and at this point it was an incremental genocide. Now it's a full-on genocide. And what have we seen? We've seen countless children killed. We've seen over 100,000 people killed since last October. I mean, and that number is quite frankly inaccurate, because Israel has been using bombs at this point which completely evaporate bodies, where you have nothing left. So it is way worse than it has ever been since last October. And he goes through all of the different operations that Israel conducted. At one point he says that what Israel was doing was too boring a subject for the Western media to bother with, and too elusive for human rights organizations to make a general point about them. So, you know, like these different processes that Israel engages in, you know, the world is like tired apparently, and, you know, bored. Like, how, you know, yeah, you know, it's really such an awful thing that people can become bored of humanitarian crises. Like, I feel like calling it a humanitarian crisis is like even, doing it injustice. Like, it's so much worse. I don't even know what you can call it to really describe what it is. Yeah. Let's see. It says, there is no chunk of land in the Strip that Israel covets, and there is no hinterland like Jordan into which it can expel the Palestinians. Ethnic cleansing as the means to a solution is ineffective here. So that's what he wrote back in 2017. But what have we been seeing? Ethnic cleansing. And what have we seen is that the Palestinians literally have nowhere to go. Like, they've been now crammed into the tiniest little sections of the Strip because other countries will not take them in. And we've seen the entire Gaza Strip like completely obliterated. Like, if you've seen the images, there is absolutely nothing left. Like, it would take God knows how many years to rebuild this area. Like, it would take I can't even imagine the amount of money it would take to rebuild everything that has been destroyed. Like, in this chapter, he talked about how different buildings were destroyed, like schools and hospitals and this and that. Yeah, not to the extent we have seen since last October. Like, it's a full-on genocide. He talks about the different absurd names that they name their operations, like First Rain, then Summer Rain, then Autumn Clouds, then, you know, Hot Winter. And he just talks about like how really like just sinister, how Israel gives absurd, indeed sinister names to their operations, which I thought was interesting that he commented on their names. But he comments on how you can see an escalation in every single operation from one to the next. You will always see an escalation. And he talks about how early on the UN and the EU condemned Israel for its disproportionate use of force, but then eventually they stopped. Eventually, like, they just stopped condemning Israel because every subsequent time, Israel just increases its force and increases its destruction and so on. There's a really interesting chart here that he provides in the book, that a graphic that I hope everyone took a look at. And it says that there was a direct correlation between the intensity of the siege and the intensity of the rocket launches into Israel, as the accompanying diagram prepared by the Carter Peace Center illustrates so well. So yeah. So I hope people looked at that. So, you know, Israel would not comply with ceasefires, even back then, and definitely not now. Like, there was a ceasefire declared with Lebanon. Then what did we see? Immediately, Israel broke that ceasefire and started bombing Lebanon. Like, Israel does not abide by ceasefires. So yeah, and you see a lot of that in here, and he goes into all the different, again, the operations and the ceasefires that Israel broke. Oh yeah, and then it starts talking about the tunnels that Hamas built. And it says the Irish-Palestine Solidarity Group Sadaka published a very detailed report compiling evidence showing that Israeli officers knew that there was no danger whatsoever from the tunnel. The government just needed a pretext for yet another attempt to destroy Hamas and kill Palestinians. And what did we see on October 7th? A pretext. Do you think Israel actually cares about the hostages? No, it needed a pretext. And that's why we've seen evidence that Israel knew about the upcoming attacks and still did nothing to stop it, because this would provide them with the pretext that they needed to commit a full-on genocide and take control of the gas off of the shores of Gaza. And as we know, that gas is worth billions of dollars, and Israel has had its eyes on it, and Israel has had its eyes on creating a greater Israel for many, many years, as we've seen from this book. So yeah, and then it talks about, you know, all the different rockets that Israel has had fired onto them by Hamas, and how it like literally kills like no one. Like, it kills like a couple people here or there. And in fact, he says, let's see, the preliminary, so yeah, so he's talking about a bombardment, Operation Cast Lead. Oh yeah, and he says that this reminded many people of the carpet bombing of Iraq in 2003. The main target was the civilian infrastructure. Nothing was spared. Hospitals, schools, mosques, everything was hit and destroyed. And it says most of the Israeli killed, because Hamas launched rockets in response. So it says most of the Israelis killed, 13 in total, were soldiers killed by friendly fire. In sharp contrast, 1,500 Palestinians lost their lives in the operation. And again, we're talking about civilians. Because as we've seen before, discussed in this book, that Israel treats Palestinian civilians as though they're the military, as though they're all part of a terrorist organization. And it drops bombs on civilian locations. It does not distinguish between civilians and an actual militant group. It like literally treats every single Palestinian as though they are militants. Then again, it talks about more operations and so on. And he talks about how the situation was like that of a police force entering a maximum security prison it had controlled mainly from outside, only to be faced with the desperation and resilience of prisoners who have been systematically starved and strangulated. And I really, quite frankly, like how he calls Hamas soldiers brave fighters in this chapter. So here, again, is an anti-Zionist Jewish Israeli author who does not believe Hamas is a terrorist organization, and I think he lays out pretty well his justifications for believing as he does. And as we've seen, quite frankly, for Israel, it's never self-defense, and he does a really good job of explaining how it is not self-defense. So yeah, one of the things, so the end of the chapter is just really depressing because the way he ends this chapter, it's like he's trying to explain what the future might be like, and it is so much worse than he could imagine back then. So let's see. Oh yeah, there was one part, I think I accidentally skipped over it, but there was one part where someone was captured by the Palestinians, and Israel used it again as a pretext to do whatever they wanted. Oh yeah, so the capturing of IDF soldier Gilad Shalit in June 2006 did not change the balance of power between Hamas and Israel, but it nonetheless provided an opportunity for the Israelis to escalate even further their tactical and allegedly punitive missions. After all, there was no strategic clarity over what to do beyond continuing the endless cycle of punitive actions. And he basically shows how time and time again, Israel will use whatever excuse it can to bombard Palestinians and kill as many civilians as it possibly can, which is genocide. He talks about how in 2012, Hamas reached Tel Aviv for the first time. And again, he says caused little to no damage and no casualties in Tel Aviv. But what did we see in return? Thousands of Palestinians killed. And then he talks about how for the first time the Israeli army fought face to face with the Palestinian guerrillas in the Strip. And that's when the quote that I read before, the situation was like that of a police force entering a maximum security prison. And he says, it is frightening to think what Israel's operational conclusions will be after this clash with brave Hamas fighters. He talks about Syria and the war in Syria. And he says the UN has predicted that at the current rate of destruction, by 2020, the Strip will have become uninhabitable. It is completely uninhabitable now. This will be brought about not only by military force, but also by what the UN calls de-development, a process whereby development is reversed. So I'm just going to read that quote. It says, 3 Israeli military operations in the past 6 years, in addition to 8 years of economic blockade, have ravaged the already debilitated infrastructure of Gaza, shattered its productive base, left no time for meaningful reconstruction or economic recovery, and impoverished the Palestinian population in Gaza, rendering their economic well-being worse than the level of 2 decades previous. So yeah, so what are we seeing now? All of what he predicted, but much worse. So moving on to the next chapter, that the two-state solution forward is the only way forward. I really love this chapter and how he breaks down this myth and talks about how the two-state solution is not the solution that we should be looking for and focusing on, and how it really is not a solution for the Palestinian people. Yeah. Let's see. So he says, yeah, I'm gonna skip that part and try to go to more things. He talks about how, let's see, any criticism of this myth. So he basically starts talking about how any criticism of the myth of a two-state solution is labeled as anti-Semitism. And he says the two-state solution is based on the assumption that Israel and Judaism are the same, which he's already talked about are not, and he's already talked about how Zionism and Judaism are not the same. And he says that, you know, it's akin, so he says blaming Judaism for Netanyahu's policies is like blaming Islam for the actions of the Islamic State. 100%. So again, coming from an Israeli Jewish anti-Zionist author. So let's see. So basically, in this chapter, he starts talking about how the solution really is to create one state and abandon this myth of a two-state solution, which is never going to work. Yeah, at one point he says, the charade of this two-state solution and a peace process, blah, 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 will end peacefully or violently, but either way painfully. It seems that nothing is going to stop Israel now from completing its colonization of the West Bank and continuing its siege on Gaza. So yeah, and he says this might be achieved with international blessing, and it totally is. That is exactly what we have seen since last year, since last October, including its continued colonization of the West Bank. So yeah, and it talks about how Israel will need to use brutal force to implement its vision of a solution, annexing half of the West Bank, ghettoizing the other half, as well as the Gaza Strip, and imposing an apartheid regime of a sort on its own Palestinian citizens. Such a situation will render any discourse on the two-state solution irrelevant and obsolete. I love this part where he talks about the Dictionary of Illusion and Deception. So he says its famous entries include the peace process, the only democracy in the Middle East, a peace-loving nation, parity and reciprocity, and a humane solution to the refugee problem. I love how he points out how Israel just does nothing but lie and throws out these terms which are utterly meaningless and are not based in truth, based on how Israel acts. And then it says a replacement dictionary has been in the making for many years, redefining Zionism as colonialism, Israel as an apartheid state, and the Nakba as ethnic cleansing. Again, another part I love, he says, Palestine was always the land between the river and the sea. It still is. Its changing fortunes are characterized not by geography, but by demography. Yeah, he says, peace is not a matter of demographic change, nor a redrawing of maps. It is the elimination of these ideologies and policies. Let's see. He starts talking about the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement. Let's see. He says, the sacred distinction between Jewish settlements in Israel before 1967 and those in the West Bank after 1967 should be consigned to the grave as well. The distinction should instead be made between those Jews who are willing to discuss a reformulation of the relationship, a change of regime, and equal status, and those who are not, regardless of where they live now. He says, the last sentence of this chapter is, once the two-state solution is buried, one major obstacle to a just peace in Israel and Palestine will have been removed. So this chapter was all about how you cannot have peace with this myth of a two-state solution, which is never going to happen, and really does not address the grievances of the Palestinians either. You can never have peace without truly addressing the grievances of the Palestinians. And what are their grievances? That they are refugees with no right to return. They were forced out of their homes with no right to return. The Palestinians in Israel are living in an apartheid state. The Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza literally have no rights, nothing. They are continually having their homes destroyed. They're continually being arrested for nothing and without trial. I mean, we've gone through all of this. We've seen all of this, and a two-state solution is clearly not the solution, especially according to this author. And I think he did a really good job of convincing me of that as well. And then finally, the conclusion, the settler colonial state of Israel in the 21st century. So in 2017, the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip will have lasted for 50 years. He says 2 generations of Palestinians have already lived under this regime. So yeah, then he, again, as he started in the beginning of the book, he talks about settler colonialism, and what Israel is settler colonialism. What Zionism is settler colonialism. And he talks about that again, and how he's done a good job of proving that. Let's see. He says, when you found a state on the basis of dispossessing another people, your moral legitimacy will always be questioned. Confining the question of legitimacy only to the territories Israel occupied in 1967 will never resolve the issue at the heart of the problem. And then, again, he mentions how Zionism was allowed to become a colonial project at a time when colonialism was being rejected by the rest of the civilized world. And then, he talks a bit about how there should have been another solution to the question of anti-Semitism. A solution he mentions is that Germany could have become a really diversified state that accepted everyone. A strong multicultural Germany showing the way to the rest of Europe. Like, that could have been a better ending to the story of the Holocaust rather than settler colonialism in Palestine. So yeah. So, you know, his hopes of, you know, of what he believed could have been a better solution. He says, nothing like that could happen if we continue to fall into the trap of treating mythologies as truths. Palestine was not empty, and the Jewish people had homelands. Palestine was colonized, not redeemed, and its people were dispossessed in 1948 rather than leaving voluntarily. Colonized people, even under the UN Charter, have the right to struggle for their liberation, even with an army, or in this case Hamas. And the successful ending to such a struggle lies in the creation of a democratic state that includes all of its inhabitants. A discussion of the future, liberated from the 10 myths about Israel, will hopefully not only help to bring peace to Israel and Palestine, but will also help Europe reach a proper closure on the horrors of World War II and the dark era of colonialism. Yes, I honestly think that this is such a must-read book, and he did such an amazing job in breaking down so many of the myths that we keep on hearing since last October, and which are which Israel tries to hammer into the rest of the world time and time again, and spends billions on propaganda in order to try to get the rest of the world to believe. I think that there is a really, the road ahead is still full of challenges, even with I would say over at this point, 300,000 Palestinians killed. Like, I've seen estimates saying that it is very likely that over 300,000 Palestinians have been killed since last October, because again, Israel has been using bombs which completely vaporize bodies. There has been countless people who are missing, unaccounted for. We've seen mass graves dug. We've seen, it's just, who are the vast majority of the victims? Again, is children and women, because we've seen that Israel is committing a genocide and wants the Palestinians to stop from procreating and adding to society, Palestinian society. I think that this is a very important book that everyone should read, and it is a very digestible read as opposed to the 100 Years' War in Palestine. So if you had to choose one or the other, I would say start with this, read this, definitely read this. But how do we get other people to read this? How do we educate people about what they need to be educated about? Because again, whoever is watching this segment is probably already on the side of truth, on the side of humanity, against the genocide of the Palestinians. How do we get people, like, for example, in this industry, who are completely dead silent about the genocide, or have in fact, supported the genocide, like Quackalope? How do we get people like them to acknowledge what is really happening? I don't know if you can. Like, Muslims and Arabs have been so dehumanized that how do you get people like Quackalope or Board Game Co. or these other Zionists in the industry to view Palestinians and Muslims as human? Like, if they can just sit peacefully and live with their lives, live with the fact that a state that they fully support is committing a genocide, like, what does that say about people in this community? What does it say about people in the board game community who continue to remain silent about actual colonialism, settler colonialism that is happening before our very own eyes? Not make a fuss, not care one tiny bit about actual colonialism, but make a huge fuss about themes of colonialism in board games that are from history long ago. Like, how do you get people to care? I don't know. You tell me, having finished this book, let me know what you think his views on the two-state solution are. Just, I just want to hear your thoughts on the last few chapters of this book. And a few of you commented that you would really like to read a book about Palestine pre-colonization. Like, what was life in Palestine like for the Palestinians before colonization? I have not yet come across a book that I feel would address that topic, appropriately. So I'm still looking for recommendations on that. And I hope that by the next video, I will have a book that we can read for our next fiction book club. But if you have any recommendations, if you've heard of any good titles that discuss that topic, please leave the titles in the comments below, because I would actually really be interested in learning about Palestine pre-colonization as well. I think that that would be really just enlightening and just allow us to see, you know, one of the myths broken down, that Palestine was a land without people, which we've seen is not the case. Palestine was not a land without a people. There were people there. There were indigenous Palestinians there. And to learn about that would be really wonderful. So thank you again to everyone who participated in this book club and stuck with it. I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about this very important humanitarian crisis, this important genocide that is happening. And, you know, I hope that you will educate the people in your own communities and help spread the word, because that's how word spreads. And that's how communities hopefully change for the better, and hopefully revolt for things for the better, and, you know, protest for things that are for the better. So yeah, so thank you again. And we will hopefully have a new title next week that we can all pick up and start reading. So yeah, so thank you again. So let's move on. Before we talk about the question of the week, I do want to mention that there will probably not be another weekly playback next weekend, but the week after, because I think I'll shoot my top 10 games of 2024 next weekend, and then I'll be back with a weekly playback the week after. So no new weekly playback next week. So now let's move on to the question of the week. The question of the week is inspired by Baghdad. Can you please tell me what your favorite Middle Eastern themed game is, or look, you know, a location about the Middle East, or something to do with the Middle East? So, you know, I really love Merv and I really love this game. I think it would have to be between those two games now. Last week in my weekly playback, I actually talked about Tabriz, which is about, you know, creating Persian rugs, making Persian rugs. But I talked about the reasons why, you know, I might not add that game to my collection. And I think it's very unlikely I would add that game to my collection, though I do want to buy the metal coins. But this game, like, oh my God, I absolutely loved it. And of course, the Scholars, the South Tigers trilogy. Absolutely love those games. So honestly, it might be between this and Inventors of the South Tigers, or Scholars of the South Tigers, and Merv. Like, I think that those four are my 4 favorite games that have to do with the Middle East. Let me know what your favorite game is that has to do with the Middle East, and whether you are interested in checking out this game or backing it once it's on Kickstarter. I really, really loved it. Yeah, I just think it's a really good game. Though I do wish that maybe the rulebook will actually talk about this. I don't think that the rulebook that I have really went into the history of Baghdad and how the game actually relates to Baghdad. So that would have been nice to know, I think, because as I'm playing this game, I can't really feel like as though... actually, maybe I'll read this. So, introduction. In the 8th and 9th centuries, under the stewardship of the Abbasid Caliphate, Baghdad rose to prominence as one of the world's foremost centers of learning and intellectual exchange. The establishment of the House of Wisdom, an institution dedicated to the translation of ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian texts, laid the foundation for this revolution. Academics in Baghdad tackled subjects ranging from astronomy and mathematics to medicine and philosophy, blending classical knowledge with new thinking. This cross-pollination of ideas was not only preserved ancient wisdom, but propelled them towards new discoveries, turning Baghdad into a beacon of innovation and scholarship that illuminated the intellectual landscape of the medieval world. Set during Baghdad's golden age, players take on the role of viziers vying for the attention of the continuous stream of poets, philosophers, doctors, scientists, mathematicians, authors, artists, and inventors visiting the great city of peace. Grow your family's reputation and compete to become the caliph's most eminent courtier. Honestly, that sounds a lot like the Scholars and Inventors of the South Tigris schemes and Wayfarers of the South Tigris. So yeah, so very similar theme, but different mechanics, but yeah, all wonderful games. So tell me what your favorite Middle East themed game is, and until 2 weeks from now when we are back with another weekly playback. Until then, bye.